For more insight on this, because one member of the Louisiana caucus is not enough, with Walter Isaacson, a non-area member, let's bring in Republican Senator John Kennedy, also of Louisiana. He serves on the Banking and the Budget Committee. Senator, thank you so much for being with us. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you,
I want to ask you about the two issues that we're hearing from Republican senators the most, both of which I think you're concerned about. And let's start with the one that'll affect your constituents, and that is Medicaid. The concern about Medicaid cuts. You know, there's always been this belief in past 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that Medicaid was mainly for hospitals and urban centers, but a lot of your constituents in Louisiana and also Red State America also concerned about Medicaid cuts. We've heard it from Josh Hawley and others. What are you going to be looking at during this process on the issue of Medicaid to protect your constituents?
Well, certainly Medicaid's important. Medicaid is one of the issues we're spending a lot of time on. The SALT deduction as well, the phase out of the climate tax credits and deductions, how quickly we ought to do that, how we can reduce more spending. Look, I've been through this before, Joe, you have too. We're at the lively discussion stage. This thing will go one or two directions. It'll either go to, we'll come up with something we can support, or it'll turn into a crime scene. I think we'll end up passing a bill, and if you want to talk about it, I'll be glad to tell you why. I think a lot of folks are missing the larger issue here. But certainly Medicaid's important.
And the other issue, obviously, that other senators have been talking about, Republican senator, that I've been talking about a good bit, is the debt, the federal debt. We're $37 trillion. This adds, CBO says $2.4 trillion. There's some quibbling about that, whether their projections are too static or not. I'm curious, are your concerns about the spending levels in the bill that the House sent over to you? Is that going to be part of the deliberations in the Senate? Is it something that concerns you?
Yes, sure. I mean, I've said, and will continue to say, because I believe it, that I'm for cutting spending unproductive spending until we run out of votes. But we can't do everything that everyone wants. And some people are just going to have to accept a ham and egg sandwich without the ham. We have some members of the Senate that will not get all the spending reductions they want. Here's what's driving this, Joe, and this is ultimately why I think the bill will pass. We're in uncharted waters here with the tariffs. I think the markets are telling us that. We don't know what impact they're going to have on the economy. But if we don't extend those tax cuts, we're going into a recession. And our economy is going to be on a journey to the center of the earth. And ultimately, I think that's why the bill will pass.
We're in uncharted territory, as you say, on the tariffs. We're also in uncharted territory on our national debt, $37 trillion. It's just exploded exponentially over the past 20 years or so.
Yep.
Do you have any hope that Congress can be responsible, that the House and the Senate can somehow figure out how to at least bend the line where we start moving back toward a balanced budget?
Sure. I mean, I'm an optimist. I'm a paranoid optimist. But in the last year, certainly the last 100 to 150 days, the conversation up here has changed. Under President Biden, the conversation was basically who needs to pay more in taxes. The conversation now, really on both sides of the aisle, quietly more of the Democrats, is what the hell happened to the money? Elon Musk makes a valid point. We have become, or will become, if we don't do something about it, debt slaves. Mr. Musk says that we need to relearn the magical healing power of no. He's right. But you're not going to be able to do it in one bill. You're just not. That's just practical, political, and frankly, economic reality.
Let me turn it over to your fellow Louisianan, Walter Isaacson, for a question. Walter.
How you doing, Senator?
Fine, Walter.
I wanted to ask you, you say you can remember the old days when we used to have grand bargains and stuff. Most of the deficit coming out of this bill is because of the extension of the tax cuts, and you say it's important to do that. But are there any of those tax cut extensions that are less important than others and could be part of a bargain?
Sure. I don't know if they'll be part of a bargain, Walter. I mean, I don't think there's any way that Senator Schumer lets any of his colleagues vote for this bill. That's a topic for another day. But
would
I
there
think
be some of those tax hike extensions? I mean, some of those tax cut extensions. Does some of them make sense to you to maybe trade off?
Yeah, we're looking at it right now. I mean, we're discussing very seriously what ought to be in the bill. Look, I'm labor, not management, but if I were management, what I'd do is I would tell the Republican senators we're going to work every weekend until July 4th. And what helps a lot is when we can get together and everybody who wants to have it can have a meltdown. Meltdowns are okay. You just can't unpack and live there. But the sooner people get this out of the system, the better. And that's one of the things we're looking at. It's a smart play.
Senator Kerry, good morning. You mentioned the tariffs yesterday. You grilled Commerce Secretary Lutnick about what seemed to be some ideological inconsistencies as to why this administration is doing these tariffs, reciprocal and the like. Talk to us about that moment and whether, frankly, you have faith in the Commerce Secretary's ability to lead the president's tariff plan.
Well, it's clear that President Trump listens to Secretary Lutnick. So I spent the time I had trying to figure out where he's coming from. And I don't understand. I asked him point blank. I mean, my vision of reciprocity, which I think is a good thing, is to lower tariffs, if you can, to zero on both sides. And let there be a free exchange of goods and services. May the best product and the best service win. And I thought that's where Secretary Lutnick was going. But I asked him yesterday if Vietnam, for example, removed every tariff and every trade barrier, none, zero results, would we remove ours? And he said, no, that would be silly. So the obvious question is, who's on first? What's on second? Why are we having these trade talks? And I don't understand, based on his answers. I'm going to try to have a conversation with him.
Well, you lead me to a follow-up question here. You know, that same uncertainty is clearly reflected in the markets. Business leaders aren't sure where this is going. Foreign governments aren't sure where this is going. What is can you get a sense as what is the point of these tariffs? Are they creating more chaos and harm than any revenue they may be bringing in?
Well, I know what the point is for me. It's reciprocity. But clearly the markets haven't figured it out yet. I mean, you know that. Unless you have an opium habit, you can see that every businesswoman, every businessman, everybody who has money in the market, bonds or stocks, is just going, we don't know what to do right now because we don't know the impact of the tariffs. And what I was trying to do with Mr. Lutnick was sort of flesh out, where are we going here? Where are we going here? And I don't know whether he doesn't know. I'm going to assume he was being purposely evasive. But the uncertainty is hurting us, and that's why if we don't pass these tax cut extensions, aside from the political ramifications, Congress will do great damage to its 10% approval rating. But more importantly, it'll tank this economy, man.
Right. I want to ask you, I want to circle back because you brought up the SALT deductions. It's always irritated people that represent states like Louisiana, and back when I was a member of Congress from Florida, it always irritated me when people from high tax states would push for a SALT deduction and an increase of a SALT deduction, because doesn't it seem, and I know there's a leading question, but I think I'm allowed to ask you this leading question, my show. But doesn't it seem like it's just encouraging bad behavior? It's encouraging state governments to continue to raise taxes if the federal government is increasing the SALT deductions?
Well, yes, and that's the point. But the SALT states have a fair counterpoint, if we're being fair. They say, look, we contribute more to the federal government than we get back. And a lot of that goes to the states that are complaining about the SALT deduction. And that's a fair point. But the truth of the matter is, it's $300 to $400 billion, the SALT deduction. We have to have pay-fors. Everybody's screaming like Congress stole Christmas about reducing the deficits. They're right. And the SALT deduction is just a low-hanging fruit.
Can I ask you, while we have you here, I want to move on to another subject that concerns me, and I know you probably hear a lot about it as well, and I'd love for you to give us some perspective on what we're doing and whether the Senate's going to go along with this. There have been a lot of cuts to research and development. The president talking about cutting grants to universities where the best and brightest students from across the world come. Obviously, you can look at the founders of Silicon Valley and our biggest startups over the past 20 years. A lot of them actually are immigrants. I'm wondering, what should the Senate, what do you believe the Senate should do on National Institute of Health cuts and some of the other cuts in research and development, whether it's inside the federal government or funded the way we've done it since 1945 through our universities? What's your general attitude on that, and where do you think we're going to go in resolving this current standoff?
Well, look, I'm a big fan of the NIH. I think they do breathtakingly innovative work. They've saved millions of lives. One point that NIH needs to get its head around, and I know they're resistant, same for the universities. We shouldn't be giving grants where the receiving institution can spend 50% on overhead, and they're doing that. Many of the universities are taking money off the top that's supposed to go to research, and they're using it to operate their universities, and that's just a fact. We need to do what the Gates Foundation does and say, look, you can spend 10%, maybe 15% on overhead, but you know, we're no longer going to let you spend 50, 60%. Number two, I think Congress eventually will go through those NIH grants and restore a lot of them, because a lot of them are good work. In terms of the universities, right, there's a way out of this for the universities, maybe we can talk about sometime, that would get the federal government off their back. I'm not saying the federal government shouldn't be on their back, because a lot of them deserve it. But the universities are important, but they're not the only institution that can do research. And frankly, Harvard isn't, nor Columbia, nor Princeton. We've got a lot of great universities in America that follow the American Association of University Professors' statement of principles and practice viewpoint diversity that could do some of this research. I honestly believe, I know people, I'm well aware that President Trump exists loudly, but honestly believe that in the case of Harvard, Harvard is in many respects violating federal law. They just are. And they say, but we're entitled to the money anyway. And they're not, and it'll be interesting and impactful to see how it turns out.
And what federal law is Harvard violating?
Well, here's what I think Harvard is doing. Harvard practices ideological capture. They don't practice viewpoint diversity. I think among not the sciences, but the humanities, Harvard teaches, for example, that the world is divided between oppressors and the oppressed. And oppressors should be punished, and they're evil, like America, Israel. The oppressed are victims, and they should be helped at any cost. I think that leads Harvard to support racial quotas. I think they're still using racial quotas. I think that supports Harvard to believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to harm the Jewish people. And I think that violates most of the civil rights laws. Now, the way out of this, the federal government said, look, Harvard, are you doing this? Harvard says no. The government says, well, how do we know that? And Harvard says, I give you a pinky promise. Maybe we were at one time, but we're not anymore. What Harvard needs to agree to is a monitor, a monitor that they pick. And Trump has offered this to them. Let Harvard pick a monitor to verify that they're not breaking federal law. Now, the federal government would have a veto power over the monitor, and that, to me, is the short way home. But I don't think Harvard's going to do that. I think they're trying to wait out President Trump. They figure a Democrat will come in and they can go back to normal.
So you're saying almost like an ombudsman. Newspapers used to have ombudsmans.
Yeah.
You're saying somebody that Harvard appoints themselves, that the government can agree on, and that can
Sure.
act as sort of an ombudsman between Harvard and the federal government.
Yeah, I don't want to run Harvard University. I mean, and I don't think any fair-minded person wants government to run a university. Hell, we can barely run the post office. But the truth of the matter is that I honestly believe Harvard is violating federal civil rights laws. I mean, I've seen what you've seen, and the fair way out of this is a monitor. Not a censor, a monitor that's acceptable to federal government. If Harvard's telling the truth and they say, pinky promise, we're not doing it anymore, then, you know, what's the old saying? I say it a lot, you know, trust in God, but tie up your camel. Let a monitor come in, both sides acceptable, and report back to everybody.
Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning.
Thank you, Senator.
Bye, Walter.
We appreciate
Bye,
it.
Joe. Bye, Mickey. Thank you.